Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for your patience. This is the October meeting of the International Game Developers Association. My name is Adrian Sandoval. I'm an adjunct professor here at Drexel University, a freelance game designer and the chair for the organization. Thank you so much for coming to what I think is a really important topic, networking primer. For a lot of you, a lot of students in this room, this might be some of the first time you've heard this information. It's something I have been thinking in the last couple, the last year or so, that's kind of a lost art. It was something that was really, really important that was drilled into my brain when I was going to school. Thank you, Ryan Morrison, over in the back there. With an assist from another individual we'll be hearing about in the slides very soon. And thank you to my wonderful panelists who in just a moment are going to introduce themselves for joining me on this panel to talk about this topic, because we've talked a little bit about it and they seem to agree with me. So my hope tonight is to kind of impart a lot of the knowledge I had to you and also update a lot of information for 2024. There are a lot of new things that happen, a lot of new developments. So we'll get into all of that, but first you should know more about our organization. So the International Game Developers Association, for those who do not know, the mission is to advocate and support the professional career development of game developers. And for us here in Philadelphia, that means supporting our academic community as well as our indie community. It's a big scene, it's a thriving scene. Hopefully it's on the verge of really growing. We've got a lot of things that are happening in the pipeline that we're going to talk about. So the International Game Developer Association has chapters all around the world. However, if you'd like to learn more about the official organization, head over to igda.org and learn how you can become a member. Speaking of networking, the biggest benefit to to joining as a member is getting access to their Discord server, which has over 1,500 game developers around the world, an instant digital network just open to you immediately that you can apply some of the stuff we're going to talk about tonight. So that's a really big benefit to checking them out. So highly recommend that you do that. Here in Philadelphia, we do these meetings every second Tuesday for content such as this. You'll be hearing more about our November meeting at the end of tonight's panel. Just as a quick reminder, we do have a code of conduct, which you can check out in full at www.igda.org/Philly. And you can keep up on our events and things as well on our Discord channel. If you need an invite to that, let me know. Or you can check us out on Twitter, Facebook, and other social media channels. So we're there as well, so you can get all the events and updates on things that are coming up. So let's get started. Rob, you will move us to the next slide, please. Introduce my. So I already did kind of my intro. So. There we go. There's our information up there.
Oh, do you want this on before?
I probably should have remembered that it was there. Yeah, it's okay.
I was typing it in the chat.
It's okay. I just came from another event and now I'm hosting this event. There's going to be some growing pains. You all are aware. So there's me. There's a lot of the stuff that I mentioned already, including some other things I've been doing, such as being an IGDA member since 2007. I've been attending Philly Game Mechanics meetings since 2017. I was a conference associate at GDC from 2009 up until about 2019 when the obvious happened. I've also been attending consumer shows since 2006, and I've studied at Cumberland, Camden, as well as Rowan University, all of which is going to be relevant tonight. We're going to talk about why I mentioned all of those things in just a moment. So now I'd like to introduce our panelists who are here, and I'll let them introduce themselves as well. And move on to the next slide, Rob. So I want to, for the folks here in the room, please tell us your name, what you're currently up to, and I'd also like to just kind of hear a little bit about kind of an icebreaker to this, kind of an example of a time that networking has helped you.
All right, okay, so I guess I'll kick this off. Hi, everybody. My name is RJ Reyes. Is my name? Yes, it is. Look at that. Great. So, hi, I'm RJ. Once again, if you haven't already, join the Philly IGA Discord server. But you can find me, RJ Reyes, right there. I welcome you. So, message me if you have any questions on game development. But anyway, I've been working in the games industry since 2004. I started in QA first for THQ, a publisher that doesn't exist anymore, and then after that, 2K Games. 2008 was my first job in production. So since 2008, I've been a game producer of one type or another. And by that, I mean, I've been an indie game producer. I've been a AAA game producer. I've worked for big and small companies. I've worked on big and small scope projects. So either as a full-time employee, a contractor, or an outsourcer, I've worked for Amazon Games, Disney Interactive, Epic and Lego. The last release project that I worked on was Lego Fortnite. I'm also here, and I mentioned this before, I'm an organizer. I guess like as of right now, I'm an organizer for Philly Game Mechanics. Join our Discord server there as well. We'll share the link on the Philly IGA Discord. Now, when it comes to networking, like, so I've been something that unfortunately, it's a reality in the game development. It's not a very stable job, or working as a game developer, unfortunately, it's not very stable. But layoffs are a natural part. It sucks, but it's an inherent part of being a game developer. And I don't want to scare you folks, but 2023, 2024 is the worst effing situation I've seen. But again, I don't want to scare you. I'll tie this back in networking. Throughout my 20-year career, I've been affected by layoffs and studio closures and project cancellations, just losing my job multiple times. I've had over a dozen different jobs over the past 20 years. A majority of the jobs that I've gotten were because of network. Let me back that up. The reason I got the interviews that got me most of those dozen jobs I got were because of network. Because I knew someone at a company that was like, hey, there's a job posting, there's a job opening, I think RJ would be a good fit for that. And they were able to fast track my interview. Because the main perspective that I'm coming from is networking is a huge advantage to getting a job, especially in this environment. Because, and maybe some of you already know this, the cold application, sending an application online to a place or a company that you have no connection with, it's effing hard. But networking, finding a job is always difficult, but you need every advantage you can get, and networking is a huge advantage. So anyway, nice meeting you folks.
Hey everyone, my name is Ken, and I'm the owner of Previously Pluto. We're an experimental game company in Philadelphia. We do digital, tabletop, and officially TTRPGs. Our first game is called The Big Shuffle. It's like a 1930s film noir card game. And what makes our team so special is that half of them are actors, which is very bizarre to hire actors, but they're really good at selling product, they're really good at writing, they're really good at promotional work. And we were actually able to convert them to designers, programmers, artists, etc., and made our team very eclectic in terms of what we can make. And now we plan to create, we have 3 projects actually releasing in 2025. It's kind of funny because we like to make our games so different, they're extremely hard to market together. Because our second game is called Oddware, which is a sci-fi visual novel about androids in space, which is the exact opposite of 1930s black and white gangsters, right? One has no color, the other has all the colors. And we also are doing an Afro fantasy card battler called Katusha. We just announced like last week. And that whole team's a team of POC, and it's a high fantasy game where we kind of look at the Black diaspora from the continent to Afro-Caribbean to African American and create high fantasy from the ground up. Because the thing is that with Afro fantasy, the art style either hasn't been expanded upon in a uniform way or doesn't really, not really well known. So primarily we're kind of building that language with our team. And our last game is a Greek urban anti-capitalistic TTRPG where we're all gig workers together called Laurels. Like I said, and the thing is that we're also a production house inside of our own company, which saves us a lot of costs. So we're always looking for multifaceted talent. So events like this, conventions, whatever, we're always looking for people that will have that like magic skill set. Someone that we kind of train, even in a university setting, we always want students to be like well-rounded, like know a little bit of everything, but focus specifically on one thing. And that's what we're kind of looking for in our company. Beyond our own things that we do at our company, we also are associated with BGM, with the IGDA, and work with the community to create a philanthropic effort to support people that are looking to get in the games industry and make it less exploitative, less layoffy, and actually create a healthy scene in Philadelphia and the surrounding area. The whole concept is the entire East Coast. And we would love to have you guys be part of that, the future. That's me. Oh yeah, I should say that with the thing, right? I have 2. One's a silly one and one's more of a serious one. The silly one is this. I'm a VR developer too, and I've been doing VR development since 2012. And when I was at Tokyo Game Show in like last year, I was part of an online event of developers, and someone recognized me at this one booth called EOZ, and they made VR chat like specialized straps for your chest and like your arms and legs. And because of my development support on one of their worlds, they're like, "It's you, you're that guy." I'm like, "Yeah, I am that guy that made that thing in that crazy VR chat event, dressed like whatever." I won't say what it is, 'cause it's really bizarre, I'm sure, but yeah, they actually gave me a whole set for free, and those things are super crazy hard to get. Like, it's just a fun, like, networking thing. And then in terms of a serious networking event, my first job in the games industry came from SIGGRAPH. Does anyone know what SIGGRAPH is? SIGGRAPH is like the technical artist version of GDC. And that's where I got my first co-op and allowed me to get into the creative field and then move on from there. But that came from Louisville. So that's how important those people on your side pushing for you to get that position is so important to have someone on the inside. And just get the skill to kind of be able to even meet with people, That's it.
Hi, I'm Rob. I'm Rob Lloyd. I'm the program director for the game design and production program here at Drexel. I'm also on the board of the IGD Philly chapter. And a long and crooked path that I started off as a solo studio photographer, then a jeweler and metalsmith. Then I figured out how to do all that digitally. And my first networking was my brother quit his job at the butcher shop when I was in 6th grade. And so I took over his job when he left the butcher shop. So that was the beginning of my networking. The beginning of my more formal networking happened when I got my master's program. I got my master's degree and I realized I could not afford to teach. It took me 15 years to come back and be able to afford to teach. And I still don't know if I can afford to teach, but it all works out. I was trying to take my digital skills and my interest in architecture and do architectural visualization before it was a common everyday thing. And the friend of my undergraduate roommate, his dad was an architect in Philadelphia. So I'm trying to call this guy. I'm in my kitchen and I dial it once. I freak out and hang up. I dial it again. This is somebody I knew from college. I've talked to this guy in real life. I know him. He knows me. 3 times I dialed and hung up. The 4th time I let it ring through. That conversation went really well after I got over the initial awkwardness. And he gave me a name of a local company and I reached out to them and they said, interesting, but not interested. 9 months later, still unemployed, by the way, they posted a job for something that was not me. I think they wanted a macromedia director developer. That tool doesn't exist anymore at all. I wasn't that, but they were hiring and they liked me 9 months ago. They hired me and that was my first job. And that led to a 15-year career doing all manner of weird things, including making games and rides on motion platforms that went to museums and theme parks and the like, doing every bit of multimedia that I can imagine. I got to know the Drexel program when it was just starting 20 plus years ago, and I hired digital media students out of the program for a decade. I've seen a lot of portfolios, I have a lot of interviews, I've hired and fired a few people over my time. I teach a portfolio class at Drexel, which involves not only how you package yourself, but then how you build that networking. And all of you have this basic network in front of you, the people that are in this room with you, the people that are in your program. That is the foundation of your network, your instructors. So we'll talk more about this as we go through, obviously, but fair or unfair, all the best jobs are gotten through networking. By the time something is an advertisement, you're fighting against all of humanity for that job. And so having some inside access, even if it's just been posted and you know somebody who knows somebody who's on the inside, it's getting, as RJ said, it's getting the interview that is the hard part, getting your foot in that door. And so It is unfair, it is uneven, but you're all here in this room, and that is the beginning of building your network to the next stage. So I think that's enough for me.
I was gonna say, so I have a couple stories I could give. I do want to keep it fair, but I also want to keep it moving. I'm sure that everyone here has a lot of questions and a lot of things to get to. My stories might come up as we go. So really quickly, to get this started, I just want to give a quick shout out to this person, because this is where a lot of the information is coming from. And if I don't credit my sources, you know, that's a hypocrite. So when I was getting started, to carry out to what Rob was saying, like it came from, again, Ryan Morrison really pushing me to get out there. I was a person, I still have a lot of social anxiety. It's just a lot of years of trading to get me to be up here and do things. So when I was getting ready to start going to shows and conferences and learn what I learned about networking, I learned a lot of it from this person, Darius Gazemi, former game developer and web engineer, currently working as a senior engineer for applied social media at Harvard. He wrote a guide, Effective Networking for the Game Industry, circa around, and he kept this going as a blog. He kept going as part of his overall blog from like 2005 to 2009. That was essentially the guide that I used going to shows like GDC for the first time. It was what got me a lot of the same information that for what I would put on my business card, what I would put on my website. So for a lot of this, I went through the site. I looked at a lot of that note and information. 90% of it is still very relevant to this day. I think a lot of it also could use a little bit of updating for 2024 because the world has changed a lot since 2009. So what I would like to do tonight is take some of that information, distill it from my experience, and also bring it to the panel to kind of like take their experience and like figure out like some of the things that could be better about this information, what we can add to it from our own experiences, things like that. I do have a link to where essentially it's all of the different blogs cataloged into one space, so you can see all of this information for yourself. These slides are going to be available after this, and this talk will be posted to our YouTube channel as well, so you'll always have access to this information. So thank you so much, Darius. Let's keep it moving. All right, so I don't want to waste people's time. I think most of us in here are familiar with the idea of what networking is. What I really like to focus on to get this started is the whys of networking. And I think there are two really big things that it comes down to. And I think actually, Ken, we were talking a little bit about this on the car ride here. Number one, people are useful to know. We've kind of like, that's kind of been the theme of the stories that I've been hearing here, right? But the thing is that people have skill sets. They have needs, they have things that they need fulfilled that you might be able to bring to the table. And they have stories that are different from your own, stories that you can learn from as well, things that you can apply to your job, to your studies, whatever it is you're doing, you can apply their knowledge, right? Those are really, really important things. So it's very useful to get to know people. Hold on one second, Rob, you moved a slide.
Oh, sorry, I didn't think I touched anything.
So it's all right. The other side of this, however, is that knowing people is also useful to other people. It is generally useful to be able to not just make those connections yourself, but also to take those connections and give those connections to other people. The more people that you get to know, you might not have a need for something, but you might know someone who does have that need, and maybe you will find it very useful to connect with that person. This is something that I do quite a bit. To me, honestly, I think it's the thing that like makes me the happiest about networking. It's less about like, for me, I really enjoy connecting people to other people, right? And that makes you memorable. It's something that we're going to talk about a lot on this panel. That will help people remember you and know that you're a generally useful person. That's going to keep them in your memory. There's something you might also notice that is missing from this list, this bullet pointed list of things that we have up here. Rob, can you move on to the next slide?
No, I won't.
Getting a job is not on here, nor is making money or marketing your game. These are definitely things that can come out of networking, but I don't think it should be the end goal. Would you generally agree with me, panel? Like, should that be the end goal of networking?
To me, the core for networking is curiosity. I think if you want to know more about this person, that is a good point, because if they know that you're genuinely interested, they're more genuinely going to answer and help you.
Oh, thanks, Rob. So I'm probably going to repeat this. I'll try not to. But I think that one of the other like essential aspects of networking is its relationship building. And this kind of builds off what Adrian was talking about. Like knowing a lot of different people, one of the reasons why like I find that like genuinely a very exciting thing is when you know a lot of different people, you learn a lot of different perspectives, and you learn about the different skills that like I mentioned earlier, I don't have any art talent, I don't have any programming talent, but knowing talented artists, knowing talented audio engineers, knowing talented programmers, that it just helps excite me. I consider myself something of almost like an emotional vampire. And by that, I mean, like if I'm left to my own devices, I'm just gonna nap. So if I were all alone, I'd sleep the day away. But when I'm surrounded by, and this is one of the things that excites me about game development, because obviously, and you know, like here, we have a room filled with talented, creative, passionate people. And when I'm surrounded by other, like whether it's game devs, whether it's artists, programmers, designers, audio engineers, other producers, like that, I feed off of that energy. Well, I probably make that sound a little scandalous. But in any event, when I'm with the creative people and the passionate people, I feel excited. I feel passionate. So that's where I get the passion for this job. Like so like I said, the crux or one of the essentials of networking is building relationships. And that ties into why I love this industry. It comes down to the people. So I've been working on this for a couple decades now, and I'm always excited because I always think I'm going to meet someone new. I'm going to learn like something different. I'm going to learn something new. So yeah, like networking, and forgive me for stating the obvious, networking is about relationship and it's about people. And chances are some of you probably agree with me. Like you feel excited when you're surrounded by other exciting people, because excitement, passion, creativity, it spawns more passion, creativity, and energy.
So I'll probably echo a few of the points here. One, it's actually one of the most enjoyable parts, rewarding parts of my job, is playing that connector. You know, I tell my students all the time, come to me with anything. I probably don't have the answer, but I can help you find the person that does have a good answer. So that joy of connection is definitely part of it. Foundationally, you don't want to think about networking as this transactional exchange. The best network is a network of friends. So if you just go out and make friends, and that is easier for some and harder for others, but if you approach making friends with people, I have been to close to a dozen GDCs, close to a dozen SIGGRAPHs. These are great events. And what is really enjoyable, and I've been to lots of other trade shows trying to sell stuff. So I've been there as a salesperson running a booth, and I've been there as just an attendee trying to make connections. And you develop this habit of not looking at eyeballs, you look at the badge to see, is your life relevant to mine? Is the title something that intrigues me? You can fall into that trap, but it's just as enjoyable to be in line to pick up your badge and just start chatting with the person in front of you about something that connects you somehow. So a network of friends is the most important thing. In terms of how you sort of formulaically sort of approach it, I give my students a simple script, and it's considered. I've thought about this. This is not something that I just sort of blandly throw out there. It's, you look for that point of connection. And for a student going to an alum, for Drexel Dragons, it's, I'm a dragon, you're a dragon. And the next question is not, what can you do for me? Can you get me a job? Can you, whatever. It's, I'm a dragon, you're a dragon. I'm trying to do X. Who should I be talking to? That question is the most considered part of that whole exchange. It is a question that is easy to receive. If you turn to me and ask me for a job, I'm going to freeze. I probably am going to disappoint you, or I just want out of, I'm going to chew my limb off to get out of that conversation. I don't have a good answer for you. I don't even know who you are. Why would I take this risk? But if you just simply ask me for who should I be talking to, what you hope is that the person says, oh, you should be talking to me. Yay, you've reached the ends of Chutes and Ladders and you're going to get that prize perhaps of a nice conversation. But it's easier for that person to escape that conversation when for a million reasons they don't want to be there. Lunch is waiting for them, they're headed down the hallway to use the restroom, whatever it is. But they can point you at somebody else, they can give you a name. And so to me, that networking process is about getting to the next conversation. And at some point, that chain might pay off. For me, multiple times it's paid off months or even years later. So it is a long-term relationship building process. I've come back from shows where I had 300 cards in my hand. I've met all these people. They were super excited about what I had and what they wanted. And I heard, oh, it's going to be great. And then none of those things converted into actual profit for anybody on either side of that organization. But some of those connections stay, and years later can become quite handy. But again, the network that is most valuable is the network of friends you're already building. You may not feel like you have anything to offer each other now, but you will as time goes forward. So don't ask for a job, ask for who's the next person to talk to.
It's probably going to come up several times tonight, but again, I almost had it as multiple slides, which is, do not ask directly for a job. Like, that's your first piece of like real practical advice. Just do not ask directly for a job. That's not really what networking is about. I have more to say on that, but let Ken give it anything to add.
Oh, yeah. So with another important thing we talked about is building trust, right? Because you're not going to refer someone you don't trust. So building a connection, being curious about what they're all about, what their specialty is, what their background is, and just having a conversation. It's the first step of creating something more like long-lived. Yeah. And talking about conventions and having 300 cards, I always end up with 300 cards. Well, I do something different than other people that are vending. I actually message every single person back I get a card from. Primarily, I have like two pockets. One pocket is like advertisement, and one pocket is people. And the people I always message back because you never know how they're going to connect, who you can connect to other people to, what business to connect other people to. And I've given so many people opportunities just by going to conventions and having great conversations. And having a follow-up conversation is amazing because then you can have a one-on-one and really get to know who this person is, what they're trying to do, and how you can help them achieve their dreams and hopefully yours.
So there's a phrase on the next slide that Darius Kazemi uses that kind of sums a lot of this up that I really enjoy, which is opportunistic but selfless, right? Networking, there's some people who just hate the phrase networking because there's a lot of implication that comes with this, that it's just a bunch of people like kind of being fake to each other to essentially like try and get jobs, right? And I think that's a way you can approach networking, but I don't think it's the way that you should. I think the most effective networking comes out of what we're talking about here, which is making friends. Now, I have two other notes here on the slide. The way that Darius phrases, I've heard it phrases many different things: hard and soft versus hard connections versus soft connections. Here it's strong ties versus weak ties. A strong tie is a very close friend. That's someone that like you would feel comfortable them being on your couch, or you would feel comfortable asking them if you could sleep on their couch, right? Weak ties are your acquaintances or the people that you meet maybe once or twice at a show, right? And 9 times out of 10, like the opportunities that we are talking about, because yes, networking is a little bit opportunistic, most of them are going to be your weak ties. Most of it are going to be the acquaintances, right? But the way that like you leverage that the best is to, again, be curious about it. I like that phrasing, be curious about it. Go in with genuine interest and curiosity, like approach them and ask them and learn about who they are beyond just the industry. Learn about, like, they're going to want to talk to you about their hobbies, their kids, things like that. That's going to come up several different times on the slides. But yeah, I really like this like phrase of like boiling it down: opportunistic but selfless. And there it is. Don't ask for work, hiring needs, resume, or portfolio. There is a caveat to that, I would say, the job fair. Like if you're at a job fair, right, and you're talking to people, that's obviously different.
That's meant to be a more transactional environment.
Yes, but Right, it does, it does.
Job fair
It's not-
feel like it's physically present.
Yeah, absolutely. I much prefer like casual networking versus the job fair. And all of these things apply to the job fair, but also there's a reason why we're all there. I felt like it was an important caveat to bring up, but yeah, absolutely.
I have one little tidbit to add.
Sure.
One little tidbit to add. I actually have a traffic keeper on all my business cards because when you start networking, you're gonna get like a huge amount. So I try to keep them all super organized and use all my stationaries to just make sure I know who's who to talk to, who to connect. Just because like if I kind of put myself in their shoes, I would want them to remember me, so I try to remember them the best of my ability.
Yeah, for sure. And like, so a lot of the stuff that we're touching on is also going to come up. Like we're going to talk about business cards. We're going to talk about a lot of these things. I don't like to put things like in a list. I believe that's the next slide. We'll move forward, but like networking could be broken down into these steps. And this is what we're going to basically be covering a lot of tonight. Your research that you put in before going to an event, before if you know you're going to a place like an IGDA meeting or a conference like GDC, making yourself memorable, which we've talked a little bit about, meeting people, and from meeting people, making friends, taking notes, which we've covered a little bit today too, doing more research, following up and keeping in touch, and then repeating that process. That is essentially your networking breakdown. We could put it into a list. I think that's like the overall steps. And I think we've touched on a lot of these. Anything I missed? Just checking. We're gonna go down each of these.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, all right, so next slide. All right, research. So we've talked a little bit about this not being being opportunistic, but with a selfless angle to it, and comparing it outside of just your traditional job hunting, right? However, to put your best foot forward, I would say that doing research is important. The way that Darius puts this is know your history, which is essentially know the industry history, know about the companies that are in the area, know about the people who are in those companies, but also know about the industry in general, know what all the different roles are. We were having a little bit of a conversation about that at the start of this, actually. Know what the different roles are and know what they do. And the benefit of this is that it's just going to be able to make it easier for you to have a conversation with someone, right? If someone tells you that this is what they do at the company, you might be able to add something that you might be able to ask a question about whether it's the size of the company, if they're using a particular piece of software, things of that nature. So we've talked a little bit about the research angle on this. I'd like to be curious to hear about like the research and such that you all do.
You'll do yourselves a really big favor if you enjoy reading gaming news. With a show of hands, how many of you actually read on a pretty regular basis like gaming news? So, okay, every hand should be up. So maybe not tonight, but eventually, by the end of this year, all of you, if possible, learn how to enjoy reading and keeping tabs on what's happening in the overall industry. And so here's the thing. It's impossible to know everything because this industry, it's simultaneously a small world. And at the same time, it's so big. There are so many different layers, so many different subjects. It's impossible to know everything about game development. Like I know very little about programming. I like to think I'm pretty good, like when it comes to the art space and just the general design and what's going on with games industries, or with different game companies. But it's impossible to know what's happening across all AAA. But by the way, I don't want to make any assumptions. Does everybody here know what AAA means? Oh, forgive me for explaining the obvious. But anyway, so like I said, you'll do yourselves a very big favor if you learn how to enjoy reading game news. So how many of you folks use Reddit? Like fantastic. I'm addicted to Reddit. I'm on Reddit like an unhealthy amount of time. Without fail, every single day, I cycle through multiple different game-specific subreddits. So the big ones, like gaming, not so much because gaming's all memes. Our gaming is like all memes, but our games are, the PC gaming subreddit, the game dev subreddit, obviously, and then occasionally the subreddits that are dedicated to like specific games. And the reason that I say that you're going to do yourselves a very big favor by learning how to enjoy keeping track or just reading game news. Like it makes it fun doing that homework. So I'm reading about, okay, what's currently the biggest game in the indie side of things? What's currently the biggest game in AAA? What's currently the biggest controversy? Also, I'll build off something that Adrian said, knowing the different roles. Like, if you meet someone and they say, oh, I'm a technical artist, or I'm a rigger, or I'm an AI programmer, or I'm an NBC behavior programmer, or I'm a scripter, so on and so forth. Just having that fundamental knowledge so that you can ask engaging, intelligent questions. But then again, even if you don't know, like somebody tells you, oh, I specialize in accessibility. Let's say you don't know what accessibility means. That not knowing, even that can be leveraged, even that can be useful, because you should have that genuine curiosity. Oh, you're in accessibility. Please tell me, I don't know what accessibility means. So what is it that you do? Or, someone says that, I'm a producer. I don't really know what a producer does. Tell me what's your, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? So anyway, to sum up, you'll do yourselves a really big favor if you learn how to enjoy just reading gaming news. And, we're all gamers here, right? So just knowing what's going on, like, how did, I was about to curse again. Like, what's the latest way that Ubisoft screwed up? Or, what's the current, like, what's going on with the Stardew Valley he's dead? Like, he's making what, Haunted Chocolatier? How many of you folks play Stardew Valley? So, Concerned Dave. So, like, is he focused, like, right now, is he more focused on updating Stardew Valley, and he's just been updating it for free for years now? Or is he actually making Haunted Chocolatier? So, it's fun knowing what's happening in the gameplay space. And you'll find that the more you know about the gameplay space, like current events, that'll help you, strike up conversation and maintain conversation easier. And then last thing I'll say, just knowing the foundations of game development, the different roles, what they do, the different departments, that can also help keep conversations going and also help you strike up conversation.
I was gonna say, that's all great stuff. Definitely should be knowledgeable about your field. And also be knowledgeable about your technical field. So whatever you specialize in, it's also good to be able to have like a little stuff like whatever you're all about, be able to rattle it off in a way. I believe what is that, the elevator pitch, right?
Yeah.
I guess so. But to me, the most important part is just like general prep, not insane dossiers where you like do a deep dive into the history and
That's
grab.
crazy.
Yeah, don't go too crazy. Just general prep. And mostly when I do prep is when I go to conventions. Because the biggest thing that for our company's success is conventions and on the booth kind of marketing. It's how we kind of survive. So we kind of like look who our booth mates are, vendor mates are, people at RS Alley, celebrities are going to be there. Just getting a general sense and just a base, and then being able to pick out which location I want to go to, talk to, or theoretically run into. That's pretty much all we kind of do. We don't do a crazy deep dive because that will just drive us nuts to do that every single time. So that's us.
The kind of research that you do depends on who you are at that point in time and where you're going. So if I'm a vendor trying to sell something while I'm at this event, then I am definitely researching my customers, right? But if I am a student going to a conference trying to make connections, then at the very least you're doing the sort of baseline of what RJ was talking about, and it can be overwhelming. Right, there's some people in the chat were sort of talking about some of the niche areas, or this show has its own Discord, this event has its Discord, this community. There are Discords that just list other Discords. I mean, there are lots and lots and lots of things. You cannot connect with them all. One of the sort of adjustments I want to sort of make, I won't go through this site by site, but I want you to think about the media that you are consuming. When he was asking about like what game media are you reading, some of you may be reading audience-facing, consumer-facing platforms. What's really important is that you're reading maker-to-maker platforms and staying at least aware of the business-to-business platforms, where it's GameIndustry.biz or game, again, you could rattle off 20 gazillion of these things. I have a limited capacity. I can only handle so much. We have a news channel in the Drexel community Discord. I mute the industry channel. I don't watch the own news channel that I give to my students. Because I don't need to, because I have a whole RSS feed that I see all the same headlines and way more. And so every day I'm scrubbing through my news feed, seeing the latest world news, political, cultural, arts, non-game stuff, and lots of game headlines. having an awareness of what's going on, even just at the headline level, is a good general place to start, and then chase the rabbits that intrigue you, or start chasing the rabbits that really are part of your career path and really go deep with that. Join those discords that are user experience specific or production specific or programming, whatever. I've limited my social media diet. Reddit is not for me, but I consume a lot of content. I miss the days of Twitter, and if you're a level designer, October is one of the greatest gifts of the community back to itself. There are so many different ways to stay aware, but basically it's about sort of respecting yourself and respecting the industry. If you remain aware of what is contemporary, what is currently going on, even at that headline level, then you have that space to sort of respond. One other thing I do want to toss in about it. I am of a certain age, and I still struggle with admitting that I don't know something. And I want to encourage you to be better than me earlier in your careers and be comfortable admitting you do not know something. There are times when fake it till you make it suddenly becomes necessary for your survival. But more often than not, it's going to get you into trouble. You'll find yourself uncomfortably deep into a conversation where you are now clearly over your head, and then it's all going to come crashing down. It's way more powerful to admit your lack of knowledge and be curious and see what they offer you to learn about that option. So the curiosity that the others have been talking about is a really good way to step outside of your comfort zone and go, I actually don't know about that. Tell me more, and people love to talk about themselves. So
For sure, yeah. Well, when we get into the conversation, there's a whole bit on active listening, which I think that's a part of. Is I don't actually know much about that. Could you tell me more about it? I'm curious, and then yeah, that's a great way to continue a conversation forward. I want to add one last thing to this because I'm coming from a slightly different perspective of someone who was an enthusiast going into development. Who I have been reading video game magazines literally since I can read. Like the enthusiast press. It took me a little bit to get into the business side of things with websites like gamedeveloper.com and gamebusiness.biz. I totally think that you should be reading those. I do think that you should also be reading enthusiast press. One thing that Darius mentions is that game developers like to gossip. It is easier to be a part of that gossip when you are as aware as the others who are in your field are. A lot of that does come from the enthusiast side. There are caveats to this, I should mention. It is a very small industry. It's okay to to talk about what companies are doing and how you feel about their certain decisions and not. It's another thing entirely when you're talking about individual people who will probably be behind you and hearing you because they're all at those events. Yes, even that one. So, there is a caveat to that. However, the ultimate takeaway here is that the more research that you do, the more that you know about the industry and the more that you know about the conversations that are happening, the easier it's going to be for you to be able to enter those conversations with people.
I just, don't go negative.
No.
It's too small of a world and it doesn't, and again, it makes you look bad. Because you don't know who you're talking to or who is within earshot, it'll come back and haunt you. So stay positive.
Next,
Yep, next one.
where's my mouse? There it is.
All right, let's talk about being memorable. There are a couple key points to this. I'm going to start with a fun one. This one should be pretty quick, but it is one that I have seen a lot, and it's not for everybody, right? Which is the physical impression. Some might call this branding, right? How do you make yourself memorable when you go to an event? A very popular one I see at GDC, for example, hats. Lots of people like to wear whether it's a top hat, fedora, something like a newsy cap, something. We used to know a guy who worked at Island Officials who every event that he went to wore a collared shirt and a vest. We made fun of him, but it worked. Everybody knew him as the guy in the vest, even if they didn't remember his name right away. They knew that he was the guy in the vest. For Darius, it was wearing orange shirts. Former Philadelphia IGDA chair Grant Schonkweiler was a big rugby fan, wore rugby jerseys everywhere that he went to make sure that he stood out to the crowd. Now, this should, if you are going to go this route, and maybe you're thinking of some things right now, it should say something about who you are, right? Like some, I like one thing that redheads like myself have advantages of is that it does tend to make us fairly memorable, just the hair. So that worked. So, you know, I don't really need to go too much. It seems that people have a pretty good job remembering. I'm curious if anyone here has examples. I can't think of anything that we all do, like in terms of branding ourselves. I am curious to know if you know any personalities or types that do similar things.
Yeah, well, if I may, well, hair color is no longer a defining thing for me, or maybe it actually is now, especially once the COVID fear came in. I work in themed entertainment, and GDC and SIGGRAPH are very lively floors, but IAPA for themed entertainment literally had carnival rides and entire haunted houses in the aisles. It's hard to stand out on that floor. I would bring a motion base to the trade show. A 2.5-ton motion base would be on the show floor. And if it wasn't moving, it wasn't good enough to draw attention to it. But people there had boas and sequined outfits. I was comparatively subtle, but I consistently, for the 15 years I worked in that space, I wore a Lego watch with a Lego multicolored band that I changed the coloring on all the time. But when I shook somebody's hand, they looked at my wrist and they recognized that Lego watch. I had whole conversations with people that until I gave them my company's weird square card, they forgot me. And as soon as they saw my card, they remembered me. And so having that odd element, and I'll just throw in a little bit from the side of when I teach in the portfolio class. You guys now have, well, this has been going on now for quite a while, but there's a million different social media sites that you can have a platform on. And you might have a personal brand if you've already established yourself as a freelancer or something like that. So you have, Bunny Killer 45 is your name, and that's how the world knows you, Bunny Killer. But I don't actually care what my students use to identify themselves on these platforms, as long as it's consistent. Whatever platform you're on, you should be consistent with that. Identity is too easy to be fuzzy edge these days. It's too easy to pretend to be someone else just because you changed an L to a 1 or an I to a whatever, right? And so that consistency of the header image is always the same. The headshot is always the same. The name, the username is always the same. I actually just came across somebody built a Python script that you could type in a username and it would check hundreds of social media sites and check if it was a valid, available username on all those sites. It was a really great way if you're just starting out to build that brand. So consistency, I think, is a really key part. And then finding that weird thing, whether you're going to dress all in white and wear Willy Wonka glasses.
I was going to bring up Tom Sharp.
Oh, yeah, Tom does that too, yeah. Or, you have some other element that you can consistently wear for yourself.
So sticking on the topic of being memorable, but before I say this, the caveat, your mileage will vary. So what I'm going to tell you might not, hopefully it works for a lot of you. It's probably not going to work for all of you. Everybody, you're all going to go on your own path. You're all going to experience successes in different ways, successes and failures in different ways. But I'm just going to tell you, when it comes to being memorable, what's worked for me. And in a way, I'm gonna attack this from like a different angle. So and I mentioned this earlier, I've had like over a dozen jobs in the games industry, and a majority of those jobs were thanks to, one way or another, thanks to networking. Out of all those networking related jobs or those leads I got through networking, only once did I get a job or eventually got a job because I met someone at the GDC. I met someone at an event. Most of my networking successes were because I was memorable on the job. So with that in mind, and I imagine this is going to affect all of you, because not all of us like going to events. Not all of us enjoy traveling. I know I do, but probably, there's probably someone in this room that doesn't like traveling that much, that doesn't like going to events, that doesn't like that, because, that can be very stressful, going to events and striking up a conversation with a complete stranger and then flowing naturally into a conversation. But what each and every single one of you will do is work. What each and every one of you will do is work in the studio. So I'm hoping that this has worked for me. Hopefully it works for you. how I've become memorable on the job is one, being competent. So obviously be effing good at your job and have that confidence to know you are effing good at whatever it is you do, whether you're a producer, a programmer, designer, audio engineer, artist, whatever, animator, be as good as you can possibly be on your job, because that is a way that each and every single one of you will be memorable by being competent, by being good at your job. That's one, probably the most important thing. I take that back. It's one of the most important things. The second thing, Rob said this, be positive. And by that, I mean, don't be a jerk. Be, if you, if you're energetic, if you're passionate, or at the very least, if you're kind, if you don't complain that much. So, and honestly, I think this is at least as important, if not even more important than being competent. Being good at your job, that is super important. I'm tempted to say that even more important than that is be someone that people like to work with. So just being around you, like, because, whether you're bubbly, whether you're energetic, you don't have to be, but like, let's say if you're charismatic, but just being positive, like, if you're the kind of person that never says a negative thing about a coworker, you don't gossip, you don't talk about, so-and-so effed up, their latest build or whatever. If you're, if you're the team's cheerleader, if you're fun to work with, and we're all game developers. Not only are we all game developers, we're gamers. We're making games. What we should do should be fun. So even professionally, what we do as game devs should be fun. So I think this is probably out of all of what we're talking about is super important. But for me, the two most important things that I can say is, well, especially when it comes to being memorable, be good, be competent at what you do, and also be a positive force. Just be likable. Just having you around in a team raises in the morale just because you're around and just because you're a coworker. If you can do that, be competent and be fun to be around, that will serve you well. I can almost guarantee it's going to serve you well throughout your career.
I agree with both those points. They're fantastic. And the competency thing and the positivity thing, amazing. Because if you walk into a room and your coworkers love having you there, you're going to be referred to many, many times throughout your many years of working. For me, it's simpler. It's just being great, just a strong conversation to be memorable. Like striking up, knowing the things we talked about, like the news, your skill set, the industry, just having a great conversation, figuring out what they're kind of doing in the future, seeing if you guys can connect, just looking for those kind of avenues. That's good enough for me. And then the other element on my side specifically, because I like to hire off people, is portfolio. If you have a really great portfolio that really is like shows like multifaceted skill sets, I'm going to bring you on. If I can't bring you on at the current moment, I'll really refer you to someone else, or I'll keep you on our talent sheet, which is like huge, and then bring you up later. So that's potentially very simple.
If I can just sort of toss in something at the end here, just building off of what we talked about. The positivity, the research, all of this stuff, at a certain point, if you listen to it from a certain vector, you can start to hear, I need to be somebody I'm not.
For sure.
And what I want to reinforce for you is what is most valuable about you is who you actually are. And being confident in being honest on how you portray yourself, that can be tough, right? It can be really hard for some and impossible for others, but that curiosity, that ability to admit that you don't know something, but you're curious to learn more about it. But also when somebody says, oh, that thing, I hate that thing, you don't necessarily have to just go along and go, oh yeah, I hate that too. I don't know what they're talking about. But you can actually defend what you love, right? That's one of the very interesting things about the last couple of decades is the support for your own particular brand of nerdiness, and have that passion and whatever it is, or your particular spill on things, that honesty, that authenticity. Part of what makes you memorable is not trying to conform to everyone else around you, but allowing your own personality to come through. I mean, hopefully you're a person that other people want to be around, but if you're a serial killer, try to keep that hidden, but until the right moment, good reveal is always fun. But otherwise, you know, I think that's an important element of being
For
able
sure.
to stand out, is to allow yourself to not be forced to be
Yeah.
conformity.
And to be clear, like we've said before, with everything with the networking, like everything should be, it really needs to come from a place of genuine sincerity, right? Like I mentioned, Grant Shawwater always wearing the rugby shirt, and that's because he played rugby, like actively. He was actively playing rugby at a rugby club, like outside of school when he was here in Philly, right? Like that was a part of his personality that he incorporated into it, right? Because he can have a conversation about that. It's a conversation piece, right? And it's something that he can talk about and something that he's passionate about, right? So what that looks like for you and what being memorable looks like to you is going to be specific to you. Again, it is about that, like being genuine with all of this, right? For sure. Next slide. If this is the pitch, we can. All right, we can skip the pitch because we talked a little bit about this. We're gonna have a conversation slide a little bit later on anyway. I want to move into this. This is a big one. This is probably the number one reason I wanted to do this panel today is I wanted to talk about these business cards. Now, the funny thing is that leading up to this panel, I was playing a game. It was a narrative game which had like characters and such, and there was a younger character who made fun of the older character for still using business cards. The idea that these are out of date. We all carry phones now. We have QR codes. We have link trees. We have all of these things. So, before I talk about this, I have my opinion on this. I want to hear from the panel. Are these out of date? Are we done with
Definitely
these?
no. When I go to a convention, I lose like 500 cards every convention. People, no matter what scenario, will grab your card. They're interested in you or not. The opportunities are great. And there's so many times where I got an opportunity and I got a great connection because I had a card on me. Because there's something about the physical nature of a card that draws people in over something that's digital, like a QR code. So someone comes up with me and is like, scan my QR code. I'm like, oh, it's such a hassle. Get my card and scan this. But if I just got a physical card, I'll keep my pocket. I'm not forget it, but I have in my pocket. And things that with my card specifically, I actually have a specific element to kind of like, it's kind of like my little secret. It's a silk touch card, so when I give it to someone, here you go. Feel that, right? That special little attention to detail to that card makes it memorable for me and for people when they meet me in the first place.
Kind of reminds me of the scene from American Psycho.
I mean, listen, anyone here does art and design, it's really important to have a well-crafted card to use or, understanding of visual hierarchy and presentation and branding to create a card that they'll remember you by and want to contact you with. So it's really important to always have a card on hand because you never know when you're going to make your contact. Because there's many times where I was at a picnic and I met somebody that has the weirdest, I guess they do esports management at Harrisburg University. I'm like, how does Harrisburg University have an esports program and Drexel doesn't? This is crazy. Tell me all about your life. And here's my child. And because of that, you're able to make my contact, and she contacted me the next day. So you never know when you're going to have that opportunity, and people will always love to accept your cards.
I mentioned this earlier, answering that the previous making yourself memorable. I'm going to repeat it again here. Your mileage will vary, so I'm going to tell you what worked for me, or I'm going to tell you when it comes to business cards specifically how I handle it. But obviously, things are going to be different for each of you probably. So for me, and then one other thing to keep in mind, there's how you approach networking as an individual versus how you approach networking like Ken's talking as the owner of previously Pluto. So he's an indie dev studio head. But so there's a difference between going to a networking event or just doing any kind of networking as just me, just as an individual, versus you're representing a studio, or you're representing Philly Game Mechanics, or you're representing an organization. So for me, when I'm doing any kind of networking, whether it's a actual work, but specifically at an event, and I'm just representing myself, I have not had a personal business card in over 12 years. So me, and again, your mileage will vary. For me, when I go to any GDC, or when I go to an event, after this event or after this panel, and I'm going to talk with you folks, what you're going to see me do is I'm going to take out my phone. I'm going to show you my, I'm probably not going to use LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn a lot during other professional events. But when I speak with, and I'm looking forward to speaking with some of you, hopefully many of you, you're going to see me. I'm going to take out my phone, load Discord, and then we'll share Discord information. So what I'm gonna say is me as an individual for the past decade, for the past dozen years, instead of a business card, what I've been using is LinkedIn. So LinkedIn for me personally has replaced the need of a physical business card. And then more recently, I guess post-pandemic, so for the past 4 years, Discord hasn't really replaced. So I use a combination of LinkedIn and Discord. Again, as an individual, I haven't used a business card in like over 12 years. However, as an organizer, as someone representing Philly Game Mechanics, like we were at an event, PHL Gaming, and we had business cards, we had handout, we had swag. So representing an organization, having that physical card can certainly be useful. And the last thing I'll mention is I attended, what was it? So I guess it was August, Play NYC. So it was the gaming event, specifically the indie gaming event in New York. Play NYC had partnered with Anime NYC, so they didn't fill up. But Play NYC, for the first time this year, they were able to host their indie game event in the Javits Center, you know, the Manhattan Convention Center. A lot of the indie devs, and these are all New York-based indie devs, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them did have physical cards. But, and Ken mentioned this, all of them did have QR codes printed on their business cards. And the reason behind that was because almost not all, but most of these Play NYC participants, their games were releasing on Steam. So the QR code, either, you know, when they were scanned, it would link directly to their Steam page or a link tree that had their website as well as their Steam page list or, you know, whatever. A couple weeks ago, I asked them, hey, you know, like I talked to like maybe a half dozen of the indie devs at the showcase there. And I said, hey, do you folks like have like metrics or like after the event, how many wish lists did you gain on Steam? Or how many additional sales did you get on Steam? And some said, you know, like over the course of this 3-day event, we had like 200, like 100 or 200 people that played. And then of those 100 or 200, we got 40 wish lists or 40 additional sales. And a big reason why was because of that QR code that linked to their Steam page, their link tree or whatever. So again, just to sum up, your mileage will vary. What's worked for me, that hopefully it'll work for a lot of you, but chances are your path is going to be different. But remember, as an individual doing networking, personally, what's worked for me, LinkedIn and Discord, the combination of the two on my phone, that's worked wonders for me. But if you're representing a studio, if you're representing any kind of organization, having that physical card could certainly be useful.
Always have cards on you. Because of that random conversation in a grocery store, in some place that's completely out of context for where you would want to build your career, having that ability to exchange, whether it's a LinkedIn QR code on your phone or the physical card. I will argue for the physical card in probably 2 primary ways. One, if it's a purely digital connection, there is the chance that it just disappears into the digital noise of our daily lives, whereas that card hangs around. I went fishing in my bag trying to find my personal business card that I did over 10 years ago, and I've never reprinted since because I've used my Drexel card ever since. But I found in my jacket a copy of my card. And this is from 10 years ago. It has a QR code on it, but the QR code actually has my V card embedded in it. So it would put me into your contact list on your device if you use this. I think it's still mostly accurate for the data that's embedded in it, but I haven't used this card. This card, however, and any card that you have, one of the primary things that makes it really valuable is that, and I tested this, I got a little worried, Ken, when I saw your card, because that solid dark background, we're artists. We love to have this cool design that's really eye-catching and standing out. And that full flood of dark blue means I can't write a note on that side of the card. So I immediately went over, and then the silky finish, I was worried about the silky finish. I busted out my ballpoint pen and I wrote, ooh, nice smooth finish on this. That note, I'd come home from a show with 300 cards in my pocket. My first sort, like you would sort from company and individuals, my first sort is note and no note. If I wrote a note, that means there was something important about that conversation that I wanted to make sure I remembered and followed up on. So always have some way of communicating. The card is a physical totem that will walk away with them and help you remember. This is slightly embarrassing. I'm not entirely sure whose card this is. This might have been from the sound panel. Also in my jacket, right next to my business card, was somebody else's business card they gave me, and I completely forgot that I had it. Had this been a digital connection, that is long gone. Now I have this physical card to remind me that, oh, I met Josie, and they do audio, and maybe I should actually follow up with closing.
They were on
that
my
loop.
panel,
My
audio panel for more.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it was. Yeah. So, whoops, ugly, but still functional. I would come home from those 300 cards. I'd sort them out, follow up on the ones on the notes. Every other single one, I went into LinkedIn and said, would you like to connect? Would you like to connect? Would you like to connect? Now, back in the old days, when we carved LinkedIn out of stone, they didn't limit how many notes you could include on those connection requests. And so I could put a note in saying, hey, we met at IAPA, we talked about the motion base, would love to connect, or whatever it was that we talked about. Hey, we were in line at SIGGRAPH for badges. We talked about your cool dinosaur art. Let's talk, you know, but having the ability to put that note on there, having that card in your wallet, even if it's bent and faded and rubbed, almost illegible, it's there for you when you suddenly have to make that weird connection in the grocery store line. So I think it's a powerful tool, but make sure you leave the ability to have a note on it.
Yeah, for sure. Great story on the Darius there. At least a bit of advice is, say you're talking to someone who's like pretty popular in the game industry, or someone that like has like a lot of people just surrounding them who want to talk, right? And they're talking to you. They're actively interested. They just keep on talking, right? You have a lot of other people who also want their time, right? A really good thing that you can do is say, hey, I know there's a lot of other people taking up your time, but I really want to continue this conversation. Here's my card. We can, I'll follow up with you in a week. Makes you look good to them, makes you look good to the people waiting behind you. And here's the thing, the reason I bring it up here is you can't really do that with a phone. Like just a very like quick, like here it is, all the information is here. Now, all that information should be linked there, right? I don't have a QR code on mine. I kind of don't like QR codes, but that's a personal thing. Like that would be a question to all of you, but I do want to make sure we're moving on. But my website is here, and my website has access to all of my socials. We're going to talk about websites in just a little bit. I got, like Rob said, like it's very minimalist. I think minimalist is fine, especially if you don't have a lot of graphic design skills. I just have this bit of pixel art that it was me, but again, if you have like contract someone or go that route, that's a way you can do it. And a lot of white space for taking notes. And also I've got this little bit here that just says game designer, teacher, cake enthusiast. There's a story to the cake enthusiast thing. I won't get into it here, but every time I give this card to someone, they look at it and go, oh, what's your favorite type of cake? Which I reply, angel sweet cake. Right? It's an instant conversation starter. So I've kept it on the business card this entire time. Also, really quick to note too, I have not had business cards for a long time. I went to an event in August. I really should have been doing personal business cards, taking my own advice for a lot longer. I only made these like about a month or so ago. And then when I was doing research for this site and I got to Darius's thing about business cards, I saw his business card from 2005, which I went to the game career seminar that you did. Could you go to the next slide, please, Rob?
Can, maybe.
Okay.
Where's my mouse? There it is.
He may have been very influential on me. Again, this was not intentional. This was not intentional at all. That's his card from 2005 versus my card now 20 years later. So I just thought it was kind of a funny note, but you see, that similar advice, how that's kind of like stuck with me, right? Minimalist, memorable. There's a couple quotes on there and things, but also plenty of space to write, like Rob said. So again, still think these things are very important. I would say every student should definitely have one. Like obviously, if you have a company or something, you should go with your company's card and whatever that is. But personal cards, I think, still are super, super important personally.
And if I can just sort of tack on to that, from my old personal cards, the other approach, not only the little business card embedded within the business card, there's my branding, the color matches my site and all that, but also I just simply put a list of who I am. A little bit, it's basically a micro resume. So if you're a student and actively job searching, having enough information, not a ton, but just enough. I literally just list creative director, craftsperson, metalsmith, photographer, maker. That identifies me as this micro resume of what I'm into and capable of. It's another one of those sort of attempts to be dropping that data point of memorability.
I really.
I want to add one other quick thing
Sure.
too. And it doesn't have to be crazy printed because my first job was through SIGGRAPH and I didn't have my cards. So I went to a Kinko's nearby during like a lunch break.
Oh, yeah.
I just made it on their computers, brought them printed out, and that's how I got my first call.
Oh yeah, and by the way, that also brings up a really good point, is that business cards do not have to be expensive. Like I get mine from Overnight Prints or Vistaprint, depending on who's cheaper. And like the nice thing about these is these are the cheapest cards.
Yeah.
Don't go gloss because you can't write on them, things like that. These are like I got 100 of these for like $60, I think, and that's only because I got it in 2 weeks. I got like 2 weeks rush. Like typically these are like $30. But like push comes to shove, either a Kinko's or a Staples that you print out yourself, totally fine.
By the way, if you're an artist, you should have a quality card. Just so you know.
Oh, actually, yeah.
You on the side of your card.
My partner Karen, who I believe is watching this, was our art director at Island Officials and had plenty of room to write on the front of the card. The back of the card were just 4 pieces of key art from stuff at Island Officials. So it was like a portable portfolio.
Micro portfolio, micro resume,
Yep.
very useful.
Absolutely. Next slide. Be memorable. Okay, websites. Let's talk about websites really quickly. I think there are going to be some varying opinions on this one, and I'm very, very curious, especially in the age of social media. He's like, and we're running low. We're starting to run low on time. It's 8:34 now, so I want to try to get through these. But this is a big topic because this also includes social media, right? Personally, I still think personal sites are it's best to have a personal site if you can swing it. They're also a lot more expensive than when I was in school. So I have a Squarespace right now, and between that and the hosting, it's like 200 a year or something like that. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely
Too much.
ridiculous.
On your hosting.
I'm starting to learn how to just do my own hosting. I might go that route at some point, but yeah, it is a very expensive proposition. Linktree and Card also exists, and I think those are totally fine to just get access to your socials, right? I'm curious to hear your takes on professional on having a website that is a link to. Do you think I guess just a yes or no, right? Is that still preferable to say having your LinkedIn and social media presence?
I think if you're a web developer, then you should roll your own website and prove how awesome a web developer you are by making your own website. If you're not a web developer, don't. I talked about hiring and interviewing hundreds of students from Drexel in the beginning, and one of the early parts of the curriculum was there was a class to make your own WordPress website as your personal portfolio, and 90% of the time it hurt them when applying to my company. If you can't do it well, don't do it. Use an existing template, use a portfolio or website aggregator, Adobe Portfolio, ArtStation, Behance, what have you. Your gateway should lead to everything, whether it's a Linktree, Card, About Me, whatever. If I find you in one way, I should be able to find all the other versions of you. But if you're not a web developer and you're not selling yourself as a web developer, don't waste your energy building and maintaining a personal website. Do Wix. I personally prefer WordPress. WordPress has a variety of templates. You can spend $45 on a really nice template that's going to be maintained, and it works out really well. Find a way to do the hosting and domain purchasing. It's a nice touch of professionalism, but I push all my students to ArtStation or something similar first, and then only when that somehow proves insufficient do we go to some other custom solution, because that takes extra effort. And again, if I'm a hiring manager or I'm somebody who's getting to know you and I hate your website, I hate you.
Great.
Isn't that cruel? That's very unnecessarily cruel. That's not really true. But if I'm mad at a website that you built, that's coloring my impression of you. If you're on ArtStation or Behance or whatever, and I just don't like ArtStation or Behance, I'm not mad at you. I'm looking at your work. I don't know at the back of my head, I might complain about the platform, but it's not about you. So be careful there. But yeah, any point of entry to you, LinkedIn, website, ArtStation, whatever, should seamlessly link to all the other facets of you. If I discover you in some random way, I should still be able to get to all the other flavors of you.
Honestly, like I said, presentation is important. It doesn't matter how you do it. So as long as they're able to check your work and be able to judge your skill, if that's what they're looking for, that's what the most important. I've seen some ugly sites with fantastic content. I'll still accept that fantastic content, but I'll still in the back of my head, I understand that was a bad like holder of your work, you know? So things like ArtStation, Card, Square, Space, all those things are all viable because it's all about your first impressions. But if you are a web developer or you are a graphic designer, that is part of like kind of judging. And the thing is that if I'm hiring and you have your own domain, that's impressive and that's really great. But again, if it doesn't look great, then you've already been tossed. So it's really important that your presentation is great from the get-go. But I do think it's important to have a web presence.
Sorry about that. I almost lost my train of thought. So okay, going back to the original question of, should you have a website? Yes, and, but here's the thing. Or you should have an online presence, I should say, not necessarily a website, but an online presence. What kind of online presence you should have depends on what profession you are, like depends on what kind of discipline. So there was one person in the back that said that they want to be a producer. So I'm a producer. I don't have my own website. I don't have a portfolio, because if I had a portfolio, what would I put in it? Spreadsheets, roadmaps, so like, here's a screenshot of a Jira that I manage. Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, what I do is not visual, or I should say, what I do, if I were to make it a portfolio, it would look boring as S. So as a producer, I've never had my own personal website. What I do have though is LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, obviously it's your online resume, or I'll talk about me specifically. My LinkedIn, it shows my accomplishments for every single job, the companies I've worked for, and the projects I work for, both big and small. So my online presence, my professional online presence is only LinkedIn. However, like I said, only one person in the back said, like you, who said you want to be a producer. So what I said, having just LinkedIn works for producers. But every other person here said that they didn't want to be a producer. So I'm assuming that means you're an artist, you're a game designer, you're a writer, you're perhaps an audio engineer. So every other kind of, specifically every creative needs some kind of online presence, and it's different. The platform is different depending on what you are. If you're an artist, you obviously need a portfolio. Your portfolio, for those who here is a visual artist, whether it's 2D, 3D, animated, or what have you. Okay, so several of you. You're artists, I'm telling you right now, and I think the next Philly IGDA event next month is a portfolio specific. So we can talk about portfolios for hours. I'm not going to talk about it here. But I will say though that you as an artist, your portfolio will do the heaviest lifting in your job applications. So as a visual artist, you need a portfolio. If you're a writer or if you're a narrative designer, also you need a portfolio that'll have samples of your writing. If you're a game designer, I've seen a lot of game design portfolios, and it's typically videos or clips, trailers, or whatever footage of the games that they've worked on. Audio engineers or like composers, SoundCloud, or whatever website hosts the music or hosts the sound effects that you created. So those of you who are actual creatives, you're creating something, you need an online presence that showcases your work. For those of us who are doing the boring stuff, the producer work, LinkedIn is perfectly fine. And the last thing I'll mention about just that online presence, socials. I don't have any socials. I'm kind of paranoid about having like Instagram and having like Twitter, because I can't tell you how often I've seen somebody get in trouble because their name is on a Twitter. I'm not going to call that crap X. So Twitter, somebody has a tweet that they wrote 12 years ago, and it's like, hey, this person, your name and your pictures on this tweet from over a dozen years ago, and you said something inflammatory. or you said you were talking crap about this company that you now are trying to apply for. It's like imagine you're like someone is trying to apply to Ubisoft, and then that same person said, hey, Ubisoft sucked back in 2010, and that exists still on Twitter, and you completely forgot about it. I'm paranoid about that kind of stuff. That's why I like Reddit, because Reddit, it's not my real name. I'm using a pseudonym. And like, I can point as much inflammatory crap as I want because nobody knows it's me. But when it comes to socials that use your real name and your profile pic, I'm paranoid about that stuff. So personally, I'd say stay away from socials that use your real name and your real picture.
RJ, it's a troll.
Here's the flip side of that though, right? Nemo would not have been nearly successful if the combined 10, 15 years of networking between me, Ben and Chris, the three main in Nemo, like Nemo's Kickstarter would not have been success, have that leveraged network of 10 years experience all descended on Twitter and shared it out there, right?
Your mileage will vary.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate side of it. I do still think like a social presence is important. The problem is that social media is in a very weird state right now. The one quick thing I will say about this, I've been hearing it coming around, but I do think there's truth to this. Now is the time to join Blue Sky. In 6 months, it might not be, but right now is the time. Like there were people who like really big names that did not follow me on Twitter that suddenly followed me on Blue Sky when I jumped over there, right? It's like, and now it used to be hundreds of thousands, now it's millions because a lot of people from Brazil are there. Now, in 6 months, Blue Sky might not exist, or it'll be too big. Those are the two options. I don't know which one it will be, but right now is the time to join it. That's my really quick thing on that. I think you make a great point, and like there's totally a good reason to be careful about what you say there. You should also be genuine, and maybe you are working towards a community where it is okay, depending on your personality. That is, though, social media is its own whole, like that should be its own boot camp almost, right? But there is a flip side to it that I think is worth bringing up. Can you have something to add to that? And
That's one quick add.
Yeah.
If you are a producer and you have a portfolio of just your Jiras, I'll take it. So that is amazing. But at the end of the day, I want to see what you got. That's why I look at portfolio.
Sure.
Sorry, in the interest of speed.
Yeah,
keep moving.
we're gonna move this very quickly. So the wares, we've been touching on all of these. These all have their own, like, again, could be their own like full topics about networking them, right? We have where to network conferences. GDC is still like, it's unfortunate that it's still the best place if you're doing boots to the ground networking, which is essentially like in-person networking. GDC is still one of the best places. The problem is that it was too expensive when I was going in 2007, 2008, right? It is much more expensive now. I haven't been in a few years. I'd like to change that. I don't know if it will be this year that I go back. There are pathways such as volunteering. I think volunteering is one of the things I have on the next slide. Like I volunteered at GDC, helps a little bit, doesn't help for completely. But any kind of professional development show, there are other out there. I'm currently wearing a GDEX shirt. GDEX is in Ohio, and it is professionally development focused. So there are other options other than GDC that exist out there. But that's one avenue. You also have consumer shows like MagFest and things. Indie developers are there. It is a consumer-focused show that has a very specific focus. But I've also done really good networking at consumer shows, even if it's just to get to know my fellow indies, right? And you never know if they're going to stay independent. They might get a job somewhere else if that's your goal, right? Because again, it's just about building that network. So I still think leveraging consumer shows are important. Local events such as this one, thank you for coming, as well as the Philly Game Mechanics are great places to network. How you approach your conversations and how you approach things is going to be different for all of these shows, I would say, but these are like the key places to know and go to. So thank you. And we mentioned this too, Rob, you mentioned this, schools.
Yeah.
Your peer group is your first network. Absolutely.
I just want to quickly say too, 60% of who we hire is from
We'll add on.
conventions. NAGFest, VoterCon, PAX East, PAX Unplugged. That's how we met our best talents.
And also really quickly, think of the non-game places that you can go and apply your skills, right? RJ mentioned at the top that we are an historical historic dumpster fire of the industry. It's
Yeah.
a conflagration of multiple things converging on this particular seventh circle of hell.
It's the worst I've ever seen. Not to scare my folks.
No, I mean, but I think it is important to recognize that those of you who are looking at this with fairly fresh eyes, that this is abnormal what's happening right now, and it will correct over time and be different in the future. And so it won't stay like this forever. But regardless, there's still things out there that say, hey, the average lifespan of, career span of somebody in game dev is like 5 years. There's lots of reasons for that. And that's an average of people who enter, and then there's people who are in it for decades. But there are lots of ways, and my argument to my students is like, pick an industry, they use game technology. I worked in architectural visualization, I worked in aerospace training and simulation, I've done educational work, I've done things for pharmaceuticals, I've done all of what I do in games, I have done that for dozens of other industries. Not a single industry doesn't want to speak this language. So think about the other possibilities. Local companies like Blue Cadet and Night Kitchen Interactive are going to the AMA shows and other shows that cater to museums and science centers, ASTC, AMA, there's all these other different events, and they periodically come to Philadelphia. And those expo floors are covered with digital content creators. So be open-minded to where your skills are also marketable beyond the obvious of entertainment for games. So I know we got to cover a lot of stuff before we get out of here.
Yeah, we have 10 minutes left. So, and some of the stuff that we've got, that are left on the slide are things that we have talked about, like following up and taking notes. There are some more specific notes on the slides about the follow-ups and such. This is about where to meet, yeah, like going to where to meet people. Actually, no, I thought this was a really good point that Darius made that I think is also worth updating and talking about for 2024, right? Which is this, right? If your goal is to try and meet as many people and have as effective conversations as possible, you need to go to where the people are. Now, in 2005, 2006, a lot of that was about going to parties and also going to where the smokers are. Obviously, there are going to be caveats that, well, like, because if say you're at a loud event, right, that's very crowded with a lot of people, smokers have to go to these smoking areas where they're going to be. If you are comfortable with it and you don't have any other health concerns that you have to be worried about, going to those places and striking up conversations with them, even if you're not a smoker yourself, is not a bad idea, especially because though in those moments, like they really only have that small network of people that they have to talk to, right? Like going where the overall idea of this slide is to just say, you have to go to where the people are, right? Parties are also a very contentious thing and become more contentious over time, I feel, for a variety of reasons. I don't particularly like going to parties. When you go to GDC, or at least when you did go to GDC, there was a lot of pressure to go to parties, right? Because that is where, and parties tend to be bars, right? Where a lot of drinking is happening and such. I casually drink. A lot of my friends just do not drink at all. And also we have a very hard time actually having conversations because they tend to have a lot of very loud music and such, right? There are alternatives to this. When I would do volunteering at GDC, for example, the volunteers would get to stay overnight. And rather than going to the parties, I stayed overnight and played board games with the other people who were GDC volunteers who did not want to go to the parties, right? Did that mean that I missed out on talking to a lot of big execs? Sure. But did I get to cultivate a really good friend group that again, really heavily supported Little Nemo and the Nightmare Fiends a few years later? Also, yes. Right? So you have to kind of cultivate this overall advice to you and your preferences. But the general idea is that you need to go to where the people are. That also includes the digital space. We've talked about Discord. I think Discord fatigue is a real thing. I'm always talking about I'm on way too many Discords. But for a lot of you, especially again, because social media is faltering at this stage, and I don't know what social media is going to look like in the next couple of years, I think finding Discords of artists and art communities, finding Discords of game designers and game communities, right, is really important because that's how you're going to leverage those small communities and get the word out there, especially if this industry is kind of going through a shrinking phase at the moment, which it might be. So again, we have so few times, I don't, I think.
Well, do you have additional slides or we?
Yeah, there's like conversation and following up, right? So I think that at this point, I think like, because we've covered a lot of them and maybe not as in much detail, but I think like, it kind of like giving our final statements and then might be good.
Okay.
Oh, what can't,
Yeah,
can you go?
all right. Well, it's there, so I'll just talk into it. Sort of thinking of where to meet the people, where to go where the people are, but also sort of wrapping up. Loud bars filled with heavy drinkers, maybe you don't want to work at those companies, right? Maybe you want to work at the company that meets at the quiet juice bar, you know? Part of, so many of you will have the skills that will get you the job, but do you want to work with them? Do they want to work with you? There are times when you just need to get that job to pay the bills, but long-term longevity for your own mental health, you want to be happy with who you're working with and where you're working and what that environment is like. So don't feel bad and maybe even feel a little annoyed where the only networking thing is at a bar that excludes you because you don't want to be in that kind of environment. Go to where you're comfortable and hopefully you'll find your people there as well. So again, part of this is just, there's this theme of authenticity, of allowing yourself, giving yourself permission to be yourself. And if you've done a good job of being honest with yourself about the particular oddball that you are, the very weird shaped peg, looking for that exactly weird shaped hole to fit into, finding that perfect fit may take you a little extra long because you're not this conformist, obvious shape that will obviously plug in somewhere. But in the long run, you're going to be happier. It might make that initial search a little trickier. You may have to make some sacrifices or compromises to pay your bills at a certain stage. Don't wait for the perfect job. Get any job that pays the bills and takes the pressure off. It's much easier to find a different job when you already have one. But have that authenticity in mind so that you do find your own space. So how you brand yourself, how you put yourself out there. The internet is forever. When Facebook was still something only college students could use, I would have my current co-ops check out the potential co-ops on Facebook, and it was like, oh, that's an interesting photo from that party. Okay, you know, so yeah, as you think about your web presence, you think about your website, think about how you Google. How do you show up on DuckDuckGo? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it regretful? You know, keep these things in mind. Be yourself, be who you want to be, but recognize that there might be consequences from some of those facets of you. So engage, find the way that you're comfortable engaging. Find whether it's online and there's that step back from face to face, be gregarious when you can and engage people when you can, but be yourself as best as you can. And that will serve you well. If you hide the fact, if you lie, if you bullshit people and say, oh, I totally know that, I'm totally an expert in that, you're going to find yourself in deep crap pretty soon. And you might get the job, but you won't keep the job. Pretending who you are is somebody else just to fit in, you might get the job, but you won't want to keep that job. So authenticity is my framing for the night. And that's, I'll drop the mic there.
But my advice, honestly, for networking is be brave. The thing is that naturally it's hard to talk to someone else, to do a cold message, send a message out there, send an awkward email, have to talk to them in like if in the past 3 weeks and you met them, you're like, this is weird. If they remember who I am I harassing them? Do it. In fact, there's a shirt I'm wearing that expresses how I feel whenever I send an email out. And
No one told me there was stripping involved.
so this is a shirt I got from Japan. I have a lot of anxiety-based shirts. And this is how you're going to feel every time you go to a networking event, meet someone you don't know, or meet someone that is like, have tons of accolades, huge projects, AAA projects, whatever field it is, you're gonna feel just like this Pikachu, okay? It's gonna feel horrible. But just know that they're a person just like you. And they're willing to have a conversation with you. All you have to do is give yourself a chance believe in who you are, what you stand for, your skill set, and know that they want to talk to you as much as you want to talk to them. So that's mine. There, that was nice.
You're gonna be the very best.
Don't be scared.
So first, I'm going to repeat what I said earlier, because I think it really is one of, like, probably the best advice that I can give. The best networking you probably are going to do is at work. So be the best that you can be at your job, be as competent as you can be, and then number two, be positive. You know, you don't have to be charismatic if you don't think you're gonna be charismatic. You don't have to be like super bubbly. You don't have to be like, but just don't be negative. Just do your best to be a positive member of your team. Then ideally, just you being there, just your team members seeing you at work, boosts them around. So, and then other than that, one other thing I'll say is, and this builds off something that Rob said, like, forgive me, this is gonna sound like hackney, but be true to yourself. Or so not as hackney, know your strengths and leverage your strengths, know your weaknesses, and probably maybe avoid your weaknesses. And what in the context of networking, if, like Adrian said this, Adrian doesn't like parties. I don't really like parties. I don't like bars. So my weakness, I guess you can call it a weakness, I don't like bars. I'm not going to focus my networking efforts on bars. But something that, but I'm going to leverage my strengths. What is one of my strengths? I'm programmed to do well in networking on text platforms. I effing love Discord. I effing love Slack. I'm in my 40s, so I got introduced to text messaging and text communications, online communities through freaking AOL. So I've had like 30 plus years of just loving these online, just communicating via text. So if you're not a partier, if you maybe don't like traveling, and obviously we've been talking a lot about going to GDC, going to PAX, going to MagFest. If like whether you don't like traveling, or maybe at the moment you don't have the needs of travel, everybody's got an internet connection probably. Discord's free. So you can forget about Slack for the most part, but Discord is free. Do your networking, and again, leverage your strengths. What's available to you? What are you good at? Like I said, I've got an internet connection. Discord's free, and I love text or online communities. I network like crazy on Discord. And just imagine that. I don't even have to leave my house. I'm in my PJs and I'm networking and I'm making valuable connections. So, be true to yourself, but more importantly, know your strengths and leverage your strengths, know your weaknesses, and probably avoid your weaknesses.
Also starting on the internet on AOL, you think I would be better at the online text communication, but absolutely 100% agree. It's one of the things that, as part of the theme of all of this is just how much things have changed over time, right? So to kind of like wrap this up from my perspective and touching on what a lot of folks here have said, when I've mentioned a couple times now, like when I was starting to do this as a student, I had a lot of social anxiety. Like even as far back as like I can remember from high school, there was a point where I didn't even like going up to the register to like buy something. Like that's how socially anxious I was, right? And it just took, a lot of listening to folks like Ryan Morrison in the back, Darius Kazemi, and putting myself out there, the bravery that Ken mentioned, that led to literally all these like different opportunities. And that's why I kind of hammer this point. I still think that boots to the ground networking, more than algorithms, more than like certain social media channels, although like you have to leverage your networking to make those tools work for you, right? I still think it is the number one thing, but a lot has also changed in that time. And I think that like kind of going back to what we were saying about research, keeping up with how things are changing, where they're moving to, like that all has to be a part of your research too. It's not just like getting it's not just getting up and out the door, but that's the number one first step. And then on top of that, again, be genuine, focus on making friends. It's all about making friends, and yeah, it'll lead to great things. So I just, like I said, there's a lot more on these slides. These slides are going to be available if you want to get some more detail. Most of it is stuff that we have talked about. Might go into a little bit more detail on following up and taking notes. So I encourage you to check all of the, check these slides out. Also the link to Darius Kazemi's Effective Networking blog, so you can check out those links. I want to thank my panelists. I want to thank Darius for coming to Philadelphia and checking out my first business card in 2006 at the Game Developers Expo here in the Philadelphia Convention Center, which put me on this track and led us to this panel here today. As was mentioned before, IGDA will be coming back in November for our annual art portfolio review. So we're going to have panelists who are going to talk about effective portfolios and also do a little bit of portfolio review as well. So we'll have more information on that in the coming months. Thank all of you for coming out. Thank you who are online and joining us here. I hope you all got a lot out of this. We do not really have a time for a proper Q&A, but I'm going to be breaking down the room, so feel free to come up and chat while I'm doing it. Again, there's a lot more that I think could be covered, and yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think boots on the ground, in-person meetings are so important nowadays, because here's the conundrum that I realized. Most corporations are sifting through their applications using AI. And people are using AI to submit their applications. And now there's no people in that process. So it's more important than ever to meet someone in person and make a connection. So for anyone out here that already has a card, if you want to be very interested in working for an company like Previously Pluto, drop your card off and pick one of my cards up, because you never know how we can connect.
Oh yeah, for sure. You and you know, again, talking to people and going beyond the recruiter, always a big leverage point. Always has been. So
I'm definitely not making the 903 train, so the 1003 is for me, so I will also be around here for a little bit, putting the chairs back together and all that. But nice job, Adrian. Thank you for putting this together and having given us a really great framework. Thanks.
All right, folks, I'm gonna start breaking down the room. The slides will be up soon, and then we'll have this on the YouTube page, hopefully within the next couple of weeks. Yeah. Thank you.